Hello. Hello, friends. I hope you're doing well. Chelsea Colley here. I am an empowerment specialist, speaker, and author, and I empower women and moms to dream big, create a roadmap, and achieve their dreams now. All right. It is March 6th, 2022, and I am recording part 4 of Kid by the Side of the Road. The things that we've already talked about would be we talked about the Titanic. We talked about the setup of the Federal Reserve. We talked about the JFK assassination. We talked about before that in the 1800s, Abraham Lincoln's greenbacks and how he was trying to set up, which he did actually, was successful in setting up tax and interest-free money with the greenbacks. And the takeover of the Federal Reserve in 1913. And we also discussed the Titanic along with that and the purposeful sinking of it. And talked about, like I said, the JFK assassination up to 9/11, up to now. So we're going to pick back up. The last thing we talked about was the Titanic. So it looks like we're moving on to the Federal Reserve. I am on page 12 of Kid by the Side of the Road. So about halfway down. When we as Americans consider the Federal Reserve our monetary system that we don't own, which was created on December 24th of 1913 and came into power the next year, what was it that happened to America? We were warned about foreign central banks like what we have now running the Federal Reserve System, a private banking organization that took over the creation, manufacture, and pricing of our money. Hopefully y'all can hear me okay. Repeatedly, we were warned that these bankers would do what they've always done: print money like madmen, lower interest rates, get a whole bunch of loans out there, and then suddenly reverse course to spring their trap, stopping the flow of money, raising interest rates to the moon, and in that way grabbing their ill-gotten gains from the boom and bust cycles that snatch away people's life savings. After creation of their predatory bank, the foreign bankers employed those cycles almost immediately. What happened with the crash of 1929? It started in Europe when the bankers withdrew credit, setting off a daisy chain of financial busts that reached America in the fall of 1929 with our stock market crash and the collapse of business. What gain did these bankers collect? What action did those bloodline families take? They bought the dazed people's farms and businesses for pennies, even fractions of a penny on the dollar. It's hard to imagine. And in the course of all this, we've had to go through the boom, bust, depression, and war cycles. Every time they get into a useful enough depression where all the young guys aren't able to find work and there's nothing for them to do, pipes of war so our children can join the army to pay the bills, send the money home to mom, and be able to marry their girl. But many won't do this despite joining. That's because they don't come home in one piece or even alive, thus thinning our population to deprive our best, brightest, strongest, which allows the globalists to control us a little bit more by fear. John Kennedy understood all of this as the bankers tried to start another war with him sitting as president. He presided over, this is so big. Okay. He presided over the Bay of Pigs incident in Cuba. They were stirring up trouble every time he turned around. JFK knew these sorts of global threats were being dealt out by the secret societies infiltrating America, as opposed to any potential doomed overt invasion against the strongest military on earth. Most everyone around him was compromised, leaving Kennedy not knowing which of his aides, officials, and even cabinet holders were good or bad. Wow. Okay, so that really tells a lot. They're talking about John Kennedy and how he knows about the banks. The Kennedys were one of the bloodline families. If you look up the 13 bloodline families, they're one of them. But he knew all these sorts of global threats. But here it says, most everyone around him was compromised, leaving Kennedy not knowing which of his aides, officials, and even cabinet holders were good or bad. There were also issues with the Dulles brothers, CIA, State Department, and most everywhere else in the government. He couldn't win for losing. And when Kennedy was killed, what happened to the real money? Not phony Federal Reserve banknote currency he had created with not the phony Federal Reserve banknote currency. So what happened to the real money he had created with the Executive Order 11110? The day after he was assassinated in Dallas, the no-interest U.S. currency that Kennedy had created was all revoked and bought back up. As a payback to those behind the assassination, one of the very first acts of Lyndon Johnson was to revoke that non-central bank money. So that was something I also mentioned in the last video. And just to let you know, I said that JFK got $4 trillion of money with that silver certificate that he negotiated and started printing. It was actually in print when he was alive, and I said that he got 4 trillion. Just FYI, that was 4 billion with a B, not trillion with a T. So I just wanted to correct that. So I'll keep reading. When we look at the Q project in light of what's happening in our country right now, we have to remember that the central focal point of the whole operation is to reverse the effects of a coup that occurred at the killing of President Kennedy. And in order to do so, it's not just a political issue or a military fight, and not only a way to wake up the American people to what's really happening. It's also about removing the sharp teeth of these money monsters, getting their fangs out of us as a country that is being bled dry by vampires as they take the wealth out of America to make themselves stronger in order to do their globalist mischief around the planet. Ain't that the truth? They're bleeding us dry. What is the deception and problem the bankers have created for us today? Because President Trump, with loyal factions of the military backing him, are fighting and methodically dismantling the systems that the globalists have had in place for over 100 years. These systems, this is in parentheses, to control, manipulate, and make us do their will through our sweat labor. How have those bloodline wizards from the City of London responded? Through lies, impeachment, the media, riots, taking down the economy, and every other way they know how. They have tried to neutralize what our president and patriots around him are doing. Instead of just one or two bad people, we've seen many infiltrators who have embedded in the administration around this president. In some cases, these conspirators were planted there decades ago with a plan to be available at any critical moment needed. They're there to say just the right thing in the administration's ear to make the timely wrong recommendation, steering us right back into slavery. They are saboteurs, standing by to take any position where they might be needed to shortstop whatever the president and his patriot allies might do to regain control of our country in order for them to retake the ship of the state's helm. The Patriots' battle happening right this second in our country and the world is the result of long planning. It's exactly like their efforts with the Titanic, which took many years of strategizing all the way from the boat design to the accident that by design didn't have enough lifeboats or the ability to launch them readily, and switching them last second with the Olympia. When tragedy, the Olympics, when tragedy struck as intended and the doomed were given no way to officially disembark all the passengers, it appeared to be more insanity to design a ship with an inadequate number of lifeboats. But it was part of their plan that has much in common with today's plandemic. At the time of the Titanic's Olympics sinking, headlines worldwide had everyone wanting to know who was dead or living, who had made it, and who hadn't. It dominated the press for weeks, and hearings followed that lasted years, trying to get to the bottom of who was behind what and how did certain failures develop. Just as the aspects of our current pandemic were intricately designed and working together towards an intentionally catastrophic conclusion, even the time on the ship's clock was in dispute. Were they set to New York, London, or North Atlantic time? Part of the reason for questions about where the Titanic lay on the ocean floor, why it took so long to find it, was because its exact location was muddled from confusion over the collision time, making it hard to decipher where the boat was in relation to the other ships in the area at the time. And by the way, while the Titanic Olympic was sailing full speed through a field of known icebergs, other ships were rightly anchored. Nobody else was sailing anywhere in those dangerous waters. In order to bait people into some level of confidence in his abilities, the man piloting that ship, said to be one of the best safety-minded captains in the world, they claimed Edward John Smith was an admiral's admiral, highly regarded, just like that unsinkable boat. But Smith was a Jesuit, and at the end of the day, who controls these bankers? It's the Jesuits governing these bloodline families. And by the way, pointing out the Jesuit army of bankers is not anti-Catholic statement, because there is a component of the organization that is not godly. Take it for what you will, but look at the Pope's audience hall and tell me that is not a serpent's head inside and out. Tell me that's okay and acceptable. Once again, look at all those on the Federal Reserve Board. It is not Jewish men and women controlling that operation. It's the army of the Roman Catholic Church, the Jesuits. It's Godfather 3. And the big deal isn't actually happening in New York at the Fed. It's at the Vatican Bank in Rome. The hybridized Jesuit Canaanite minds controlling their hidden hands operate through the City of London's banks and the Vatican Bank, each playing their role in the Fed manipulation of the money supply, thereby leveraging the Federal Reserve systems around the world. With that, they remotely manipulate all over the economies of the world. Every church and other large group has infiltrators at this point in time. And going back in history, even priests in the Temple of Jerusalem were bending a knee to face their rising sun, their god Horus. And at the same time, they stuck their asses in the face of God's seat, which was, of course, right there also in the inner temple. Ezekiel was taken by the messenger of God to see all that wickedness inside the temple grounds, as well as a woman outside the gate on the north side of the temple who was weeping for Tammuz, the husband of Ishtar. Ishtar was the Babylonian goddess, also known as the moon's priestess. It's not just the world's governments that have been captured. It's our religious institutions also, nearly all of them. People don't understand the globalists are actually a religious operation. At first, this seems like a crazy idea, but the Green Movement, with their pagan Mother Earth, Gaia, goddess worship, proves the point. It's worth noting that the devil is often referred to as the Green Man because he camouflaged himself among the leaves in the Garden of Eden. For you skeptics, take a look at the layout of Washington, D.C. It is every bit as much a religious city as the Vatican, And at the center of DC is the most important and prominent religious symbol for this Babylonian sex cult, this Ishtar, Isis, Osiris, and Horus sex cult. Assuming we're all adults here, the Washington Monument is from their symbology, representing Osiris's penis. So we will stop there at Osiris's penis because I'm going to record the next one. So that is episode 4 for you. And I just wanted to visit the question, is 17 a psyop? And I see a lot of people saying that, and I can see how they can say that. But I also think at the same time, it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense that, the evildoers would want millions and millions of people to do a bunch of research to figure out what the evildoers are up to. I mean, I feel like that's what it comes down to. It's like the things that we've learned, they wouldn't want us to know. And also there's the fact that the devil can't create. Whenever people separate themselves from God, i.e. join forces with the devil, it takes away their ability to create, because God is a creator, and our creativity and all of that, it comes from God. So just remember that the demons cannot create, and everything that they have is just a facade. It's just a fake. It's just a counterfeit. So I do think this is God's plan, but I reserve the right to be wrong. All right, guys, we'll see you here in a minute. Don't forget to text bucket list, all caps, no spaces, to 26786, and check out chelseacollie360.com to connect with me on all of my social media and get your copy of this awesome book. If you want to step it up in life, step up into your best self, buy my book. It's called Be a Life Breather. Transform your life, transform your vision into reality. And it's a workbook as well. So it will be very valuable for you. Much love. We'll see y'all later.